right, we are live.
Good afternoon. It's 2:00. Today's March 30th, 2023. I will call the meeting of the hearings officer at the TRPA to order today. Welcome, everyone. This is a virtual and hybrid meeting, in person and online. Thank you for participating. Meeting is called to order. We'll move on to item 2, the approval of today's agenda. I'll check with the staff and see if we have any changes proposed to the agenda today.
No changes.
No changes.
Very good. Seeing we have none, I will approve the agenda as it's been presented, listed in our public notice. Item 3, the public interest comments, which are for no action. Any member of the public who wishes to address the hearings officer on any agenda item that's not listed as an announcement of appeal rights or as a public hearing, or on any other matter may do so at this time. However, public comments on the announcement of appeal rights or public hearing items will be taken up at the time that those agenda items are heard. Please note that the hearings officer is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public that are not listed on this agenda. I'll ask Catherine to look for a show of hands to see if anyone would like to address the hearings officer as I've just described it. Catherine?
There are no hands raised to comment at this time.
Very good. Seeing as we have no public comment to be made, I'll move on to item 4, which is the announcement of appeal rights. I want to let everyone who's participating today know that any decision of the hearings officer is appealable to the TRPA governing board within 21 days of the hearings officer decision. The application fee and the appeal application can be found on the TRPA's website. Let's move on to our public hearing items. We have 3 today. Item 5A, Tahoe Meadows Incorporated, expansion of the existing Tahoe Meadows Association buoy field, lakeward of Beach Road, the city of South Lake Tahoe. The assessor's parcel number is APN 029-090-001, and the TRPA file number is MORE 2021-1798. Matt Miller is our staff planner on this item. Matt, will you please begin?
Yeah, thank you. Matt Miller for the record. So the applicant, this would be Tahoe Meadows Association, is proposing the addition of 7 new mooring buoys, expanding the existing buoy field from 39 to 46, lakeward of APN 029-090-001. The applicant is also proposing to remove approximately 8 unauthorized buoy anchor blocks from the lake. The proposed expansion does comply with all development and location standards for buoy fields, and buoys are allowed accessory structures in this plan area statement.
Making today special use
No.
findings to shoreline. All right, very good. And Matt, can you help? You and I talked about this briefly. Can you help clarify the parcel layout in the meadows and how this parcel 029-090-001 is tied to the buoy field, the littoral parcel? And can you talk a little bit about their eligibility for expansion based on the information that's in the staff report?
Yeah, certainly. So I think on the screen is the site. Can you go back to that site plan? Yeah. So on the screen is the site plan. It's a very large project area, so everything is going to be very small. But the association parcel per the 1925 deed actually extends from the marina on the right there all the way to Ski Run Marina on the left, on the very left-hand side of the site plan. As you and I discussed, Andrew, there is a little bit of a discrepancy with the mapping from the assessor's office. So if you could go to that PDF, Catherine, thanks. And could you maybe zoom in just a smidge? And we have the next photo will be a little closer, but essentially the blue box there is how the assessor's GIS data defines the extent of the parcel. And then the red line is actually the extent of the parcel per the 1925 deed that extends all the way to Ski Run. Can you go to the next photo? So it's just a little closer. You can see it's a very just small strip of littoral parcel between the upland residences and the lake. I think it's in front of about 8 as it's shown on the assessor's maps. You can go to the next slide there. So this is the 1987 assessor's maps, and the lake is actually on the bottom there. And we're actually looking at the far east end on the left-hand side there of the association. So you'll look at the very bottom of the screen there, you'll see there's a 1 for the lot. Right at the bottom left hand, thank you.
Okay.
Catherine. And so that's where that parcel exists. And if you look at the other side of this page, you actually see a kind of a faint line, but not a really clear indication that the parcel extent ceases there. Yeah, there's kind of a faint, actually drawn in line on our maps.
That's it where Catherine has the cursor?
Yeah, that's what the assessors, that's the extent of the parcel per the assessor's GIS information that we have and per the assessor's record. If you go to the next.
What is it, Matt, that goes inland from there? It's also a kind of a long, narrow parcel that runs up along the side of parcel 8, is it?
Yeah.
Or lot 8? What's
I'm
that?
not sure. I believe that's an easement, but I'm not sure on that end what that parcel is.
Okay.
Can you go to the next? So now the lake is on the top, and the east side, east is to the right. So if you see here, there's nothing actually shown on these assessor maps, and I do think it might be just an error in the drawing for how they showed the extent of that parcel. So it just kind of shows the lake, and there's a line for the lake, and then the parcel boundaries for those upland homes and those upland lots. And you can go one more.
Goes right, look into the lake is what it looks like.
Yeah, well, actually, this map's a little harder, and a couple of the maps coming up will kind of show that there's essentially, and we call this the shoreline sometimes, no man's land, where the upland parcels sometimes end, and there's nothing, doesn't seem to be anything clearly between them and the high water line.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. So can you go to the next one? And then this is okay, it's another looking page, but the lake is now on the left-hand side. And this is the furthest extent all the way down to Ski Run Marina shown there. So this is just to give us a little bit of background. Can you go to the next slide here?
These are assessors maps from
1987.
before they went electronic.
Correct. And so what we based the original determination for their eligibility on. So let me take a step back. The reason the lake frontage is important is for how much they're allowed to expand the buoy field. So they have about 3,000, ish feet of lake frontage.
Staff report.
Yeah. So, we calculate a buoy field capacity allowance off of that. It's massive. That's not really a limiting factor for them. The limiting factor would be the number of residential units they serve. But we still need to know the lake frontage for the purposes of that capacity calculation and for where they can place the new buoys. Because to meet the design standards, they have to be placed in front of the association owned parcel. So again, this question of, how the extent of that parcel is important. So this is the deed provided by the applicant, and you can go to the next page. I won't expect anyone to try to read this. The applicant actually transcribed some of these notes for us. But in this, they can you go to the next one more page, Catherine. In this, where it's denoted beach there, parcel number 2, it describes the extent with a legal description of that lakeward parcel, and the applicant has depicted that on the next couple documents here to show the extent of the lake frontage that is captured by this legal description.
Yeah, that's a meets and bounds legal description.
So can you go to the next? One more. So here the applicant has transcribed some of this with notes, but essentially using those using that description, there's different distances defined, and that's the lake frontage there, 371 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, 900 feet, totaling the total length of the lake frontage that is owned by the Tahoe Meadows Association. I think there's a map on the next page. If you could zoom out one more. So the applicant has annotated this unrecorded survey and denoted where those distances occur along the lakeshore and how we got that distance of that parcel. There's no other recorded legal descriptions that the applicant provided or that I could locate for this parcel. So this is why we're going back so far to determine the extent of that parcel.
And you said this had not been recorded. Did I hear that?
Yeah, this is an unrecorded survey.
Okay.
And then can you go, I'm not sure if the next document is actually, this is just an updated record of survey provided by the applicant from 1993. And
That looks to have been recorded.
yes, this was recorded. I might actually defer Paul. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, especially maybe this last document or to the whole conversation. Could we unmute Paul Ferguson? Paul Ferguson is the applicant and representing Tahoe Meadows Association.
Sure. The first map that I annotated was
And can you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure. I'm Paul Ferguson. I'm the chair of the BUI committee for our HOA.
Thank you.
So that first map that is now being shown was prepared in the 20s and was intended to be the original subdivision map. It got rejected by the county because they didn't feel that Beach Road was wide enough. And for whatever reason, another subdivision map was never submitted and recorded, but this ended up representing the lots that were then individually deeded out. And then, and these distances that are annotated in red along the lake frontage match exactly the distances shown on the 1925 deed for the beach parcel. The other record of survey that was recorded in 1993 and prepared by Cooper Thorne has substantially the same distances, but the bearings are a little different because it was, done with GPS and state plane coordinates, and so the bearings are a little bit twisted, but the distances are still the same. If you were to parse through the 11 sheets of that record of survey that is recorded.
Anything else?
I don't have anything else unless you have further questions for Paul or I.
I'm curious if Marcia has taken a look at this information to.
Yeah, Marcia and I spoke about this briefly. I know she didn't get all of this information until late last night, so I'm not sure if she has. Go ahead, Marcia.
I did review it. And no, I think this is all very helpful. And I think it's important to remember that assessors maps are they're created solely for the purpose of assessments. So they really are not, they don't necessarily tell you where the boundaries are. And in this case, I think the 1925 deed is really the most accurate description of this beach parcel that we have. And I think it's been helpful, to have it sort of drawn onto this parcel map. So, we can, verify that those meets and bounds descriptions are difficult when you don't have a survey. It sounds to me like this parcel map was not recorded for reasons unrelated to, the accuracy of the parcels themselves. It sounds like there was a road issue. So I feel comfortable after reviewing this that the beach parcel is depicted along the entire length of where the HOA is.
And thank you, Marcia. And the follow-up question to that is this parcel the one against which the buoy field and expansion proposal should be evaluated? So is this the right parcel for this?
Yes, I think Matt and I discussed that. Yes.
This is, I haven't seen all of them obviously around the lake, but I've seen quite a few of them. And this is the first time I've ever seen one in this configuration where it strikes me as it's not our standard type of littoral parcel.
You know, it's actually, we have a lot of different standards.
Probably
I'd
have
say.
everything under the sun.
Anything from a common area parcel with the condo parcels within it, which is, I think, the standard most people think of when they think of
With an HOA and multifamily density, yes.
Yeah, and then, but we do have a lot of these strip parcels that exist and were created at the time of the subdivision for the benefit of the HOA access, everything else. This HOA actually does have access through multiple parcels.
Right, that was on the new site, the modern
Yeah,
site.
on the current site plan,
Right.
with 2 piers.
Let's go, can we go back to that one,
Yeah.
please, Catherine? It's the air photo base. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and so it's not uncommon for us to have a littoral HOA strip that is the littoral parcel in front of I'll call them lakefront houses that's, been maintained for access, for the pier use, for beach recreation and for buoy fields. So this is, I think we see them a little more on the
Yeah, let's
side.
blow this one up a little, please, Catherine, thank you. I did see that on the site plan. You can spot them. There's no house or that type of improvements on them. There are a couple of them, maybe 3 or maybe 4 along that stretch, which have the cross hatching in them.
Mhm.
So Matt, if this littoral parcel did not exist, how would this subdivision then be judged eligible for the criteria that are necessary to be considered for additional buoys? How would that work?
So there's a couple nuances to that.
Mhm.
If the HOA had an existing buoy field and they did not have a littoral parcel, the HOA was the subdivision, but there was no littoral parcel owned and operated by the HOA between these lakefront houses. We could still recognize the existing field as an existing non-littoral buoy field is what we call it.
Right.
Existing non-littoral HOA buoy field, but they wouldn't be allowed to expand. So if there was no parcel, if this parcel did not exist, the HOA would not be able to expand the buoy field.
And in this, what we see again on the site plan, Catherine, can you please blow that up just a little more? I see, let's say if the littoral parcel did not exist, there are a number of parcels that it looks like the association owns along this stretch. I think I see at least 2 on the left side, and there might be 2 other ones on the right side, might be more. With how would, if those were the parcels, how would that?
With the consideration of those parcels, the buoy field would have to be placed in front of them. It'd be a little complicated because they're not together. And so they typically, the buoy field's like a singular thing. So it'd be in front of one set of those parcels. I think there's 2, looks like there's 2 side by side. So it could be, placed in front of just those 2 parcels. It may be able to be placed in front of buoys in front of the other ones and still call it a buoy field, but we would be looking at it totally differently.
A little differently. And are there improvements on those existing, let's say those 4 parcels? I think they're all. Can you read the ownership of those 2 on the right, Catherine?
I believe
I
the
can-
hatch.
I
Go ahead,
can
Paul.
address- Yeah, the furthest one to the east has a cabin on it that is utilized by a summer supervisor that the HOA hires every year. But otherwise, the other 3 are just vacant lots.
Okay,
And I think for the sake of improvements there, I think there's a parking area in front of at least one or two of them with the piers. And then any other developments would be the pier and any access pathways to the pier.
Sure. And I realize that one of our goals in the shoreline plan and the allocation of structures and mooring structures as well as permanent structures is to ensure that these facilities and their HOA areas are BMP'd.
Correct.
And would that apply in this case?
So the way the code is written, it requires the littoral parcel to be BMP'd. In this case, the littoral parcel is undevelopable, besides, a pier stretching through it. So there's not really any BMPs that would be necessary. I think that our stormwater team, and Paul can correct me if I am mistaken, but I believe they said that the BMPs were not required for this littoral strip because it's the beach. So you don't want to put infiltration systems. Sometimes the BMP team will identify them as having a certificate.
Sure.
Meaning there's nothing to do. Those upland parcels, those upland parcels would require best management practices.
And when you say the upland parcels, which
The
ones do you mean?
the ones owned by the HOA that have the piers on where the parking lots are, where the improvements are. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a condition 6 of the permit. Even though there's not a requirement directly in the code for any of the other parcels to have their BMPs complete. We felt it appropriate to put a condition 6 in the permit that BMP shall be installed on the association owned parcels used for access to the buoy field prior to submission to future lotteries. So those 4 parcels, if they're used for access, they could show that only, the 2 pier parcels were used. They could address it's for something like this, it'd be a relatively small BMP retrofit. It'd be just making sure there wasn't any runoff, stabilizing any of the pathways, and ensuring there was no, issues or there's appropriate infiltration for the parking lots. I was on the B team for years, so just it would probably be a small and
Should be straightforward, you're saying?
Yeah, it should be straightforward. And it's in a sandy area, so the infiltration rate is going to be high. So they actually, once there's a site inspection done by our stormwater team, there might actually not be any BMP improvements required.
And we think there are 2 with improvements on them and 2 without.
One,
Yes.
one with improvements. Well, okay, so there's one structure, one residence structure, and then the upland side of the 2 piers technically extend into the edge of those 4 access parcels.
Yeah, it kind of looks like that, Paul or Mr. Ferguson, under the air photo and the patterns that are on it.
Right.
Any reason we wouldn't want to condition that now to be done as part of this buoy field expansion?
We could condition it as part of this. I think we felt that because the code wasn't direct on the requirement for all the association to have their BMPs done just for the littoral parcel, that this was more appropriate so they could, expand, because this wouldn't be readily apparent to them even from reading the code that this would be required. But this way, if there is a future proposal for expansion, before doing that, they would be incentivized to complete BMPs on the parcel. I just say we have other associations that have many common area parcels associated with them, and we typically only, for the purposes of expansion, only look at the littoral parcel, and that was that's intentional through the permit, because the littoral parcel is the one that is most likely to have the discharges to the lake. So again, BMPs are required on these parcels. So we did include something there to make sure they were completed. They would have been required in the proximity lake. I believe this would have been required in 2006 or 2008. To be
Based on that original schedule for
original schedule.
water quality retrofit.
So they are required for all parcels in the basin at this point. So again, we didn't want to hamper this approval, but it is something that should have been done already.
Mr. Ferguson, do you know if the improvement on the parcels we've been talking about here that are connected to the Littoral parcel have BMPs installed on them now?
I don't know that, but it had been an issue when we made the initial permit application back in 2009 and 10. I'm assuming it would have been dealt with at that point in time, but
See that in our database?
It wouldn't have been a requirement back in 2009.
Okay. I remember it, and I'm sure the situation's changed, but historically the Meadows was always one area or neighborhood that the TRPA had wanted from a stated policy of all parcels BMP'd and improvements accommodated was always one that was a priority. I do remember that. I just didn't know what changed. So, Mr. Ferguson, let me ask you this. If I were to change that condition number 6, as I've been describing to Matt here about for those parcels that connect to the littoral parcel that are the HOA owned ones, to install the BMPs, or at least, conduct the assessment, as Matt has said, and determine the need for BMPs as part of this permit. Any issues with that?
I don't really know how to respond because I personally haven't dealt with the need for a BMP assessment on any of the residences that I've been involved with here.
And this wouldn't be on the residences.
Well, but
I'm trying to just on the Meadow Zone parcels that have improvements that in a normal situation would require BMPs.
I think Paul's just not familiar with the BMP retrofit, is what he's saying. He hasn't.
right, in theory, I think it would only apply to typically if you have, and I'm out on a limb here, but runoff from a roof, right? Or a structure.
Yeah, it would apply
Part of it.
to runoff from any impervious surface. So that includes pathways, parking lots, anything like that, and also stabilization and revegetation of any bare soil areas to prevent discharge to the lake.
So, I mean, my understanding of the requirements to date was what Matt summarized, which is that the BMPs would be applicable to the littoral parcel and not anything else, but I don't know what would come of an assessment of those 4 parcels, 3 of which are vacant, naturally vegetated, sand and grasses and pine trees, but one.
Good. Yeah, it shouldn't be, I'm not expecting it to be a big lift then. Matt, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. It would not be a big lift. And just as I stated before, there's a very specific requirement for the littoral parcel associated with the HOA. So we did not directly require them as a condition of, but at least when I wrote the draft permit did not require that as a condition of acknowledgement. But we did feel it was appropriate to achieve that for the access parcels prior to any future application. But I like you've kind of identified, Andrew, I don't think the 3 of the parcels are undeveloped and natural. The stormwater team would identify them as either not needing BMPs or issue them a BMP certificate. Either way, they could do either. And then on the 4th parcel, they would identify what needs to be completed to bring into compliance.
Sure.
All
right, very good.
My biggest concern would be frankly that, I've got homeowners waiting to utilize these additional buoy permits, assuming they're granted and permitted. And I don't know how long that additional process might take if it would prevent us from being able to utilize them this summer.
I don't think we'd need to make it prior to a permit acknowledgement.
No, I would suggest strongly not.
Yeah, no, I agree.
We could make it.
It's before the final
Yeah,
security deposits returned.
yeah, we can make it we do not hold security deposits for buoy fields, but we could make it as a requirement by the expiration permit, or it could be made a requirement in lesser time if you felt appropriate.
Okay. Marcia, do you see any issue with that? If we were to amend the timing of the assessment and then BMP needs on those parcels or parcel, it sounds like maybe?
Well, if the applicant does not have an objection, then no, I don't see a problem with that.
All right, very good. At this point, what I'd like to do is open the public hearing and ask Catherine to look for a show of hands of anyone who would like to provide public testimony on this. Catherine?
If anyone would like to address the hearings officer on this item, please raise your hand now in Zoom by clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 if you are called in on your phone. And there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you, Catherine. And Matt, did you say, did we have any public comment on this item?
I did not receive any public.
Okay, very good. Thank,
And one, I did want to call out one correction as well to the permit.
okay, let me close the
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
public hearing and I'll bring it back then to staff. Go ahead.
Thank you. There is one correction on page 1 of the draft conditional permit. The permittee is listed as an APN.
Yes, I did see that. Thank you. Thank you for correcting. I did notice that
we
during
need
my
to
review.
correct that and make it for Tahoe Meadows Association.
Okay. Very good. And following our legal counsel's guidance, I would like to be able to amend item 6 and ask the applicant to work with our staff as part of finalizing this permit to come up with something in terms of at least the BMP assessment process being conducted, and perhaps then a schedule can be developed. It feels to me, as the way it's worded now, that we don't know if there ever will be a future submission
That's where we.
on this. That's not something that we can predict
Yeah.
at this point. All right,
So
Go ahead.
If we're going to amend condition 6, I would just be clear on what we're looking for is if it should be prior to permit expiration, they shall receive a BMP assessment, or more typically, if we're going to include a condition like this, it would be prior to permit expiration, they implement BMPs and receive a BMP certificate.
what would you normally do in a situation like this?
I would do the latter because requirement of assessment is not really any different than the current condition.
Sure, I understand. All right, Mr. Ferguson, is that something that you and your association can live with?
Well, my first answer would be, I'd rather not have it. There's something else to do, and I don't know what could potentially be assessed, but you know, I'm not sure it's my answer would be no, I'd rather not have it, but I'm not sure how else to respond.
Well, it certainly is the stated goal of our regional plan documents that all improved parcels have BMPs on them for the good of the lake.
And I'll just clarify for Mr. Ferguson that the permit expiration would be 3 years from the date of the permit issuance, if that were to happen today.
That's the standard timing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would not necessarily affect the ability to, as you pointed out, Mr. Ferguson, to put the buoys in and begin using them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that help?
It helps. It's, I'm a little unclear on why only these 4, for example, would be picked versus the 25 other residences that are adjacent to the literal parcel. I mean, it just is, where do you draw the line? Why is it that you're only picking these?
And to be related to the project area for access, like I stated previously, there isn't a clear requirement prior. Let me take a step back. Prior to application for new buoys, the littoral parcel does have to have BMPs installed, which or shown to be not required, which they're shown not to be required. But typically when we review a project, the entire project area, and in this case, we would look at the project areas, the common areas used for access to the buoy field, and the coral parcel family residences, because they're, although associated and being used for the count of the number of buoys, they're not really part of the project area for the purposes of the buoy field. And we wouldn't be compelling private owners to install BMPs because the HOA wants to pursue a buoy field expansion.
I understand the logic of that. You know, so like I said, my preference would be no, but you know, I understand the intent of preserving and maintaining the health of the lake. So we'll do an assessment, and hopefully it's not something that requires too much stuff to be done. I mean, that structure that's built there, as are, you know, most of those structures in that area are basically on sand.
And that's good. I mean, like I said previously, that makes the BMP process typically pretty simple. Like I said, I would imagine it wouldn't be too arduous for the association. And just to be clear, this permit is for 7 additional mooring buoys. So the only buoys that would be subject to non-compliance if the association didn't complete the project would be the 7. It would not be the entire buoy field.
Agreed.
Okay.
All right, very, very good. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. We appreciate your perspective on that. And I think you're right, given the location and the description you've given us of those parcels in terms of their improvements and their locations. It seems to me that it would be a pretty small retrofit if anything's determined to be needed.
Correct.
All right, I'll take action on the project then, based on the information that is presented in our staff report, including the, and I'll get to the permit in just a minute, including the findings of fact on which the rationale on which the findings of fact are based, and this includes a FONSI using the environmental checklist as the guide, the chapter 4 findings, the chapter 66 findings, the chapter 80 findings, and I think that is all in the code. Does that sound? We've hit every chapter in there. That based on the findings and the rationale in which they are based, including the FONSI, I'll approve the buoy field expansion as it's been proposed. The draft permit that goes with it and its conditions will have 2 corrections. Number 1 is to correct the permittee name on the cover sheet of the draft permit itself, past the transmittal letter, that is. And secondly, that the staff will revise condition number 6 regarding BMP certificate, the timing of that, as we've discussed. Is that clear enough direction?
Yes.
Yeah, very good. And so I'll approve the permit as it's been drafted, as we've just revised those 2 sections. Thank you. We'll move on to item 5B then, which is the Spirit of Tahoe LLC Shoreline Protective Structure Reconstruction located at 1330 Westlake Boulevard, Placer County, California. The assessor's parcel number is APN 083-162-013, and the TRPA file number is ERSP 2022-0326. Paul Nielsen is our planner on this item. Paul, will you please begin?
Sure. Yeah, so this is a shoreline protective structure. The property is about a 1.5 miles south of Tahoe City. As far as I can tell, the structure's been there for probably about 50 years. Air photo in 69 appears to show it. It's a vertical wall. It is faced with just rock cobbles from a sort of aesthetic attempt. There are exposed footings which show some erosion at the total slope, but the geology in this area of the lake, you know, it's a pretty hard pan. It's not like a soft sandy substrate, so it's fairly resistant to erosion over time. So the condition has deteriorated and is in need of repair. Sort of the main constraint to the design of the project is the presence of a sewer line, which in this photo is located off to the right, 10 to 12 feet back into the lawn. It's a sewer line that runs parallel along the shoreline like it does in many locations around the lake. And so it constrains the design of the replacement wall. As you can see, the existing wall there is vertical. The preferred approach required in the code is a sloping dynamic rock revetment, right? That's typically what you see is lay back the slope, armor it with large boulders, put smaller boulders at the toe and front to attenuate the wave energy and to resist erosion over time. Here, the threat, there's a couple considerations. One, if you lay it back, you're going to get into the sewer line. Two, if you lay it back even a little bit, there's a margin of error there in terms of risk of upset for that sewer line. And the fact is that dynamic rock revetments over time are just that. They're dynamic. They move. They're designed to move and absorb wave energy. So, in time we see those fail around the lake, even if they've been improved, 5-10 years ago, they're going to fail in the future. And since the property owner is coming forward now to take care of this slope, to pick up the tab, we're looking for a long-term solution, and that's a vertical sheet pile wall. Vertical sheet pile walls are the strongest solution to armoring the slope, but the problem is they're vertical. And so when the wave energy approaches these structures, the wave energy hits them and they either go up or down. And that downward force can create erosion at the toe. And even though the sheet pile wall is going to be sunk, probably 14 feet down, that wave energy still has the ability to, erode the toe. It's not going to affect the structural stability of the wall, but it'll create erosion. It'll entrain sediment that, is then, introduced into the lake. So through discussions and review of the project, I recommended that they take a look at introducing a small dynamic revetment at the very toe of the slope. So to cut off that 90-degree angle, you get a sloping revetment. There's a detail here that shows it. So that when that wave energy hits the vertical wall, it will go down or it will run up a little bit and be absorbed. And also help, sort of reduce wave refraction on the side of these things that can impact adjacent properties. I'm not too concerned about that in this location for a number of reasons, but that's why you're seeing a different design approach here. It's taken a while for us to get to this spot because we wanted to make sure that this was the appropriate solution. The engineer has looked at 4 different designs, and this is the preferred design, and I'm confident that this does not set a precedent for future shoreline protective structures and will bring forward to hearings officer in the future. There are specific findings that I had to make in the staff summary in order to allow this. And so just for the record, I want to be clear that this design is being driven by the upward improvements, which is not only the house, but primarily the sewer line. And so to reduce the risk of upset of that sewer line in the future, we're recommending approval of the design as modified and in the docket today.
Thank you, Paul. And can you summarize, please, those specific findings that you identified that were necessary to make to move this design solution forward?
Yeah, so testing my memory here, but
you can open the staff.
one was replace the wall in kind. And as you can see over time, they fail. And it's not the strongest approach. I mean, this thing was built probably 50 years ago. And so the technology has evolved for vertical walls. The other was, just a rock wall that's not mortared. Which, again, over time represents with those void spaces, weaknesses, that can be, impacted by wave energy. And the third is the preferred design, which is the third we didn't select is the preferred design in most of these cases, which is the sloping dynamic rock revetment. And for the reasons I just described, we ruled that out. But in 95+% of these projects, that's what we see. And then the fourth alternative was the one that's being recommended today, which is that vertical sheet pile wall with the revetment in front.
It's sort of a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, that's a good way to put it.
And that revetment that's at the toe, I think we have that in the cross section. Maybe Catherine could,
Yeah, if you
it's in
could,
the plan set, I think it's where it is. Is that continuous along the entire length of
it is
the revetment?
continuous. Yep. And not all of the wall is below the high water. But if you could go back to the site plan, Catherine. Sort of the middle section is below high water. But with the right winds and, wave direction, you're gonna get some run up. So it's primarily in here that's below high water line. So that's where you're gonna get most of the energy.
The middle of
The middle, not on the ends. And the ends are tapered back to tie into the existing revetment here and tie in back, kind of curves around back. And then this is more of a natural slope here, which is stable. It's interesting that in this location, we do not have any mechanical approaches to stabilization. It's brush, it's trees, it's some willows.
Yeah, what's going on next door on either side of the,
Yeah, and so it's
Parcel.
stable over here. It's a natural pre-disturbance, that you would see here. And so over time, Mother Nature has sort of, kept that in a good condition. And then over here, you've got a revetment that comes back, you've got a house here. And the sewer line runs basically in this area here. And then you've got the house right here.
and the sewer line goes in linear fashion. I presume it's some kind of transmission line. As opposed to just an individual single lateral
Correct.
service.
That's
that
right. That's
Carries,
correct.
carries flows from below it or downstream up to the plant or to a line that gets you to the plant ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, it's that typical approach they took in parts of the North Shore and on the West Shore, where the improvements are upland here. So they hook up a sewer and it's just gravity flow down. That was the approach. They didn't want to pump it uphill. So gravity takes it down to those sewer lines and it runs eventually to a pump station and then up.
Yeah.
But this is all gravity through here. And, there were a number of assessments that have been done around the lake. I think the Army Corps of Engineers did one of them to determine the feasibility and costs of relocating those sewer
Right.
lines. And it's not, it's a big ticket item.
It's not insignificant.
I'm not gonna say it's cost prohibitive, but it is, there's higher priorities right now, in terms of directing those federal dollars to the EIP. And, someday, maybe. But this approach, and it's nice that your property owner is, picking up the tab here at this site, it'll be solid if you decide to approve. For, a long time.
I'm curious what might happen, maybe I'll ask the applicant in just a minute, what might happen with the wave energy that you've described that often would be absorbed in a dynamic revetment design
Yep.
to one that's fixed and firm and, the probably the most armored that we offer
Yep.
here in Tahoe as options. What's gonna happen laterally with that wave energy if it will have any effect on the adjoining properties on either side of it?
Yep. So we looked at that in the report.
Okay, good.
And that's one of the reasons that we require the dynamic revetment, is to slow that wave energy down. But it's still, in high water, with the right waves, the fetch is obviously kind of this way. It's not really this way, but with north winds or whatever, you're gonna get, direct impact. And again, that wave energy is gonna go up, which we're not too concerned about,
Right,
down, or it's gonna wrap around.
that's what, yeah, that's the one I was asking.
And so the idea is that with the revetment on the edges, and not a sharp terminus, but kind of a wrapping, that it'll soften that effect. And there's no evidence of that today. So today you got a vertical wall out there.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't see anything over here. Like I said, I was surprised.
No
I should have taken some
scouring.
pictures of it. About how well the natural slope is been holding up over time. So this existing revetment, which we're essentially replacing, has not shown any erosion on this side or that side.
And it's a more gradual slope on the parcel to the, what would be this, the south?
Over here,
Yeah,
yep,
it's a more
You can see with
gradual,
the contours.
natural slope.
compared to this.
And what's going on that parcel to the north, to the right?
Well, there's a house over here. This is natural. This is in pretty good shape. Even though that it's been steep, it looks like maybe there's been some plantings over time.
Yeah, it does look much steeper on that.
But the
segment.
contours don't show. If there was a problem, one of the things you would see is you would see the contours not coming out this way. They would be going in this way.
Mhm.
That would show scour, right? That you typically see like in
More of a cut.
a sea stack in the ocean or in Tahoe, where there's a little peninsula, it wraps around. And we see that with gabions that come out and, have been used to build piers over time. And over here as well, the contours don't go like this.
Yeah.
They go like this. It's stable.
Good.
And so we think we're gonna improve the situation a little bit by not just having a vertical wall here, but having the revetment at the toe,
Yes.
which isn't there today.
Yes, we don't want to have the unintended consequences of fixing this parcel.
Yeah. Yep, so I'm confident that it'll be a better situation.
And I agree with your assessment that this is not our typical design solution that we see or want to advocate for and support around the lake, but in certain instances, it's necessary.
Yeah, and the code recognized that, because the code specifically has a section that says, if you can't do a sloping dynamic rock revetment, and you gotta do the vertical approach, then there's a couple findings you need to make.
And that was part of my prior question. I think that if I'm reading the staff report correctly, it's in the chapter 84 findings
Let me just double check, this sounds right.
that are shown under item 5 of findings, where the sloping permeable revetment is deemed to be not feasible.
Yeah, let me just make sure that's the right chapter, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Thank you, Paul. We have someone on the line representing the applicant.
Specifically C and D, Andrew. C, a sloping permeable revetment is not feasible. And D, the alternative structure will not cause significant erosion or modification of the foreshore.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
And then E is the one that is, looks to what's going on, longshore of it.
Exactly,
That wouldn't be erosion would not be expected to be accelerated.
as well as the special use findings.
And we are making,
They're a little,
Special use
they're a
findings.
little duplicative when it comes to this type of project, but that's correct.
good, yes. Okay, do we have someone on the line, representing the applicant?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Strain. My name is Gary Furumoto. I am a civil engineer with Sagan Design Group. And I'm representing Spirit of Tahoe LLC. And a couple of comments. Can we bring up the photos that you had just prior to bringing up the site plan?
Yeah.
Please. Yeah, the next, I believe it's the next page. Well, that, yeah, here we go. So a couple of comments here. We've got the existing rock wall. It's basically a rock and mortar wall, which is not a dynamic revetment right now. It's been in place, like Paul said, at least 50 years or more. And it's the location of this wall is primarily above the high water line. There's only the toe of the slope is I should say the toe of the wall is only a couple of feet below high water. And there's been very little erosion on the lakeside of this wall, primarily due to the fact that you've got a clay stone, kind of silt stone underneath the cobbles that are on the shore. And it's a very firm substance as it is. And the lakeward portion that goes quite a ways into the lake essentially is the dynamic revetment or more effective dynamic revetment, in that you have all of the rocks and cobbles to dissipate wave energy as it starts approaching the wall. So although we have a firm rock and mortar wall right now, the dynamic portion is essentially lakeward portion, going out 100 or more feet into the lake, so that a lot of the wave energy is dissipated well before it ever hits this wall. So other than that, I've reviewed the staff summary. I think it's very well done by Paul. We agree with the staff summary. I do have one question for Paul. That is on page 2 of the staff summary. It speaks about spawning habitat and mitigating the spawning habitat, the 175 feet of spawning habitat that is being impacted by the placement of cobbles and small boulders. And I guess my question is, wouldn't the cobbles and boulders essentially themselves be additional fish habitat? So that would just be a question for Paul.
Yeah, Gary, excuse me, typically, in many cases, yes. In cases where these structures are being built and feed and escape fish habitat around the lake, boulders and larger cobbles, they serve as habitat, feed and escape, right? In this case, you've got spawning habitat. And so the spawning habitat consists of these smaller gravels, which are in the sort of in the middle, just lakeward of the toe of the existing wall. So you can see in these areas, you've got smaller gravels. You do have some cobbles, yes. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
Perfect. See right in here. This is more feed and escape out here. But these are the gravels that the Tahoe red sides, the small minnows, they use at certain times of year in very close to the shore.
Very close.
Sometimes you see those fish very
Right in
close.
there.
Anyways, those are your typical spawning gravels, like you see in a river that the salmon build their reds in and lay their eggs, and it gets oxygen flow, and so that needs to be mitigated. That's in the code, 1.5 to 1.
And where in this picture, Paul, approximately, or maybe we can use one of the other photos, where will that sheet pile wall, and I presume, are there vertical elements with that in terms of columns to support or to attach the sheet pile to?
The sheet pile is basically in the shape of a W. If you were to look down at the sheet pile, it would sort of be in a W. If that makes sense, I can draw it if you want.
No, there's
So that's what gives strength to it.
So you don't need to pound or drive separate columns in
No, they just drive the sheet
Okay.
pile in
and
themselves.
fasten it.
And so that would be, done, probably like right here. When they get in there, they might need to break some of this out. But we certainly don't want to destabilize this during construction.
Sure.
And so the idea is, worst case scenario, they drive it here. And then they fill in between the existing wall and the back of the sheet pile with rocks so the water can come through the seep holes.
Go ahead.
Anyways,
And what, Paul, it looks like there's a void of some kind right there where you. were
Right here?
pointing. What is that? No, down at the water.
Down
At the
here?
water. What is that?
well,
Is that a
that looks like a
piston?
shadow to me. But there are void
So-
spaces. You can see the wall.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So when this wall was built, there were some cobbles that were on the toe of this slope, and the mortar was poured up to those cobbles. Over time, those cobbles have broken off because there wasn't any real attachment, good attachments to the mortar. And those rocks are what you see just below the concrete there. So they've just fallen into the lake. And then maybe one comment here back to the fish habitat restoration, because we do have those cobbles in that area. And those are located, it's only a couple of inches thick in that area. Because it's sitting on top of that clay stone. So, and I guess I can work this out with Paul, but I think what we could do is clear out those existing gravels there and install the sheet pile and then just reinstall those gravels over the area where you can see the clay stone in that picture right there. And that will provide additional fish habitat because the clay stone right now does not act as fish habitat.
Yeah, agreed.
Are we that fine grained in our habitat designations?
No. We have
So it'd be
we have
site specific,
flexibility.
yeah, it'd be a kind of a field fit.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
that may work. Yes, thank you for that suggestion. What
Okay,
is
good
in the
enough.
cross section? Question in the cross section that's contained in the plans. I asked Paul this. I wanted to ask you that too. It indicates the essentially backfilling between the existing wall and the new sheet pile, and there's a space in there. I don't know if it's a foot wide, a foot and a half. That indicates that there's going to be some backfill between the two. But I couldn't tell from the detail, the call outs, what exactly the material was going to be.
That will be an angular gravel. But the way we foresee this installation is that we are going to install the sheets directly up against the existing mortar wall as best we can. So the only voids there would be the thickness of the W and whatever else is needed to make sure that the wall is straight. But we would fill those voids with an angular gravel there to make sure that it locks in place.
And the detail shows the existing stem footing that may have to be modified. What's your sense of that, Gary, of if you want to place the sheet pile as close as you can to the existing rock faced wall? It occurs to me that quite a bit of that lakeward direction of the footing will need to be removed.
Yeah, so when we drive, we will drive directly through that existing toe of the wall. And that toe will likely break off. We'll just pick those chunks up and put them on top of the barge.
Okay.
It won't take much to break the existing toe apart.
All right, from a construction methodology, does that sound like it will work?
Yeah, it depends on the lake level, it depends on when they construct this, the lake is gonna come up this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's conditions that require photographs of the area pre-construction. So that the inspectors can compare that to post-construction and make sure the debris that may be left on the bottom of the lake is, picked up and removed.
Yeah, it sounds like there might be some debris, some good debris and some not as good debris
Correct.
that's out there. And I see in your conditions, Paul 3A, that there's a construction methodology submittal required. Maybe that'll address this issue.
Yeah, they often will give a construction methodology in the application. I like to ask for it later because it can change depending on the lake level.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Gary, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Maybe just one last comment is there's only a few pier contractors, or I should say marine contractors that work on the lake. This one's will likely be completed by Pacificville Construction. And when they do their construction out here, there won't be any debris left within the lake. They'll make sure it's all cleaned up. So I don't think we have any worries there.
We'll look forward to that, Gary. We agree, and that's our objective too.
Good. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Paul, did we receive any public comment?
No public comment. I got a call earlier today from the gentleman who said he wanted to call in and listen. So he might be on the phone, but no written comment, no emails.
Okay.
Excuse me.
At this point, I'll open the public hearing on this item 5B and ask Catherine to look for a show of hands for anyone who would like to provide public comment. Catherine?
If any member of the public would like to address the hearings officer on this item, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, or by dialing *9 if you have called in on your phone. And there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you, Catherine. Seeing as we have no public comment to be offered today on this item, I will close the public hearing and take action on the project based on the staff's recommendation, the information that's included in our staff report, the proposed findings and the rationale on which those findings are based, and this includes a FONSI for no significant adverse effect. Also includes the Chapter 4 findings, Chapter 21, the special use findings, and Chapter 81, which are the shoreline special use findings. Chapter 80, the shore zone findings. And as we've discussed, Chapter 84, the shoreline protective structure findings, including the alternative proposal for the vertical sheet piling wall. In Chapter 85, the erosion control findings. I will make those findings as they're proposed. Also approve the draft permit as it's been prepared by our staff, including the conditions of project approval that are included in it. Thank you. Let's move on to item 5C. The Adelman Land Capability Challenge at 1590 North Lake Boulevard, excuse me, in Placer County. On the California side, the assessor's parcel number is 094-160-008. And the TRPA file number is LCAP 2022-0747. Julie Roll is our planner on this item. Julie, will you please begin?
Sure, this is Julie Roll. So as Andrew stated, this is a land capability challenge. The recommendation from TRPA staff is to change the land capability from class 1C and class 1B offshore to class 4 and class 2, with also some remaining backshore. The backshore actually isn't changing much from the original verification. We have Marshall Munnicky. She's our TRPA soils consultant. She's on the line with us and she can give more of a detailed overview on what she found in the field as she reviewed this project on behalf of TRPA.
Thank you, Julie. Marshall, can you summarize and give us some insight into what you found in the field?
Hi, yeah, I visited the site with Denny Churchill when they had the pit open. And this area was originally mapped as the RX map unit in the 1974 soil survey. The RX map unit is kind of a miscellaneous type map unit, which is supposed to be 90% rock, talus, or lava cinder cones with like rock pieces disintegrating. And there was no rock features like that on this parcel. So immediately just upon stepping on the parcel, you can say it's not the RX map unit. And the soil was actually very deep. And it didn't have any sign of bedrock in the pit. And it had more of alluvial type soil deposits in the bottom of the pit from old lacustrine deposits, very fine textured clay loam textures in certain zones. It's most similar to, well, it has some similarities to the Cagwin soil and also to the Inville soil. I'm sorry, not the Cagwin, the Jorge or George soil, which it's mapped as in the new soil survey is mapped as Jorge, which is a deep, high capability soil. The main difference is that it has the alluvial sediments at the bottom instead of being on a colluvial, like eroded landform. And the Inville soils are also a high capability soil, but they formed over like riverine and glacial outwash and not lacustrine deposits. And this soil has like finer, more clay in it than the Inville soil. So it's definitely was a high capability soil and it didn't fall into any existing soil type. So it became the XXX soil and then was based on the slope breaks of 30%, or it was steeper than 16. So class 4 was 16 to 30%. And then the steeper area, we did not actually dig a soil pit in, but it would be 1C or class 2. And based on the fact that there's no rocks or any evidence of shallow soils there, we called it class 2, which is still the same coverage as a class 1C. And then the back shore, it remains the same. So that's what I have for you.
Can
Any
you go
questions?
back, Catherine, to the site plan, please? And have you seen this condition mapped as something that's pretty rocky? And
I have.
in the field, in this part of the lake, that there's really no rock present or not substantial enough to want it to stay in this RX soil
Yeah,
type?
there's certain areas where it was mapped too broadly. There are some areas of volcanic plugs and things, but the boundaries were too far. They extended too far from the rock area. Yeah.
Okay, I remember this was, I think this is in the area that's below the toe of the slope in the landform that's up on the plateau or mesa looking feature that's called Rocky Ridge. And that always struck me as that's probably a place where you're gonna find some rock.
Right. Yeah, there are a couple bluffs and rock, what do you call them? The
Along the
fissures.
stretch.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, leading into Tahoe City.
Hmm.
All right, very good. Anything else, Marshall?
No, I think that's it.
Good, thank you. Do we have someone on the line representing the applicant?
Yes, this is Tony Matta with Ogilvy Consulting.
Yes, Tony, any comments?
No, we reviewed the report and are in agreement with the staff recommendation within.
Very good, thank you. And Julie, did we receive any public comment?
We did not.
No public comment received. All right. At this point, I'll open the public hearing and ask Catherine to look for a show of hands for anyone who would like to address the hearings officer on this item. Catherine?
If any member of the public would like to address the hearings officer on this item, please raise your hand now in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 if you have called in on your phone. There are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you, Catherine. Seeing as we have no public comment to be offered, I'll close the public hearing on this item and take action on the project. Based on our staff recommendation that's in the staff report, including the rationale and the findings that are contained in the staff report, as well as the technical report that accompanies it, prepared by our soils team and the applicant's consultant, I will approve the Adelman Land Capability Challenge as it's been presented. That brings us to item 6 on today's agenda, adjournment. I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in today's meeting, and we will stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.